I haven't reviewed a film since last summer, but I thought we'd wrap up 2025 with one last review of one of the scariest movies of all time, The Shining. And it's one of the most iconic movies of all time, one that's been referenced, mimicked, spoofed, more times than I can count. And speaking of which, any of you happen to see Zootopia 2 in theaters this year? Well, if you do, keep a lookout. But before we get into the review, I want to give a special shout out to my online friend D. Tommaso, who requested that I review this movie. So he's the reason we're going to be taking a look at The Shining today. So, love you, buddy.
What the?
I'm glad we fight on the same side.
Now, like most scary stories, this one began when director Stanley Kubrick got a hold of Stephen King, the original author of The Shining, on the phone. And their conversation kind of went like this.
Stephen, Stanley Kubrick here. Don't you agree that all stories of ghosts are fundamentally optimistic?
And what a great team up. One of the best directors of all time, teaming up with one of the most prolific horror writers of all time. It's a dream come true. Actually, for Stephen King, this wouldn't be a dream collaboration, but more on that later. So what it boils down to is that The Shining is basically a ghost story. It's like a haunted house movie, except instead of a haunted house, you have a haunted hotel. So the movie follows the Torrance family, where Jack Torrance, played by Jack Nicholson, gets a job as a caretaker at the Overlook Hotel. Now, the Overlook Hotel is located way up in the Colorado mountain region, where during the winter, they are completely shut off. And ostensibly, that's the reason why Jack really wants this job, because he's got this writing project going on and he wants the quiet and peace to finally get the chance to finish this project. Now, it's also established in the movie that the Torrance's son, Danny, has these weird psychic powers. And this psychic power, called The Shining, enables him to detect traces of things that either already have happened or are going to happen at the hotel. Now, Danny learns about The Shining from the hotel cook named Halloran, who's played by Scatman Crothers. And Halloran also gives Danny a firm warning not to go into room 237. So, as time passes, more and more weird things start happening at the hotel. The Torrance's son Danny becomes more susceptible to these sinister forces that are taking place at the hotel. And while this is all happening, our boy Jack starts to go completely insane. And this culminates in Jack going completely insane and trying to murder his family. But as they are completely snowbound at the hotel, they have nowhere to go. So, what will happen to them now, I wonder? Okay, first things first. Now, I've always loved haunted house movies because they have two things going for them. So, you have elements of horror, and then you have elements of mystery. You know, a character will walk into a haunted house, and you will find yourself asking questions like, who lived in this house, what happened, and how do we break whatever cycle, curse is going on? And of course, in a haunted house movie, there are usually very interesting set pieces, and in the case of The Shining, the Overlook is one of the best horror settings I've seen in a movie like this. And thanks to the movie's stunning cinematography, you have this camera work that creates a level of unbearable tension. You have Steadicam shots that make it feel like the hotel is always watching, always observing its victims. And in this regard, I find the movie comparable to Robert Weiss's The Haunting, another brilliant haunted house movie that features some masterful camera work. Although, in The Shining, here Stanley Kubrick really takes the cinematography to a whole new level. Now, it should be noted that there are two versions of this movie. First off, there is the European cut, which is the first version of this movie I saw. And the European cut is about 120 minutes long, whereas the US cut features 20 minutes of extra scenes. The US cut adds more expository scenes, adding more backstory to the Torrance family. It also features more scene with Scatman Crothers' character Halloran, which is a good thing because I love his character in the movie. But overall, I'd say that the European cut has much better pacing, so if you're just here strictly for the horror experience, then the European cut might be your go-to version of the film. Now, this movie does leave some things open-ended, so as a result, this movie's been pretty much analyzed to death. And if you're interested, you can check out the 2012 documentary Room 237 if you want to learn more about all the off-the-wall interpretations that have been made of this film. Apparently, some of those interpretations include conspiracies around the moon landing being faked. There's a theory that the Overlook is cursed because it's built on an Indian burial ground. And then there's a theory that the characters are all trapped in some kind of hellish nightmare cycle in the hotel. And that makes sense to me because The Shining's visuals make it clear that the characters are stuck in some kind of a loop. The movie contains a lot of symbolism involving both the mirrors and a maze, effectively making you feel as if you're trapped in a house of mirrors the entire time. And that's what the Overlook Hotel is, essentially. It is like a maze where the corridors of the hotel seem to stretch out into infinity. And this is where you can view the film as a metaphor for mental trauma. It's not just about being trapped physically in one location, it's about being trapped in the confines of your own mind, which in itself can become sort of a maze. So in these haunted house movies, you see a lot of characters that are confined to the house, but they are also confined by other things, such as finances, trauma, whatever. And often, the worst place within the haunted location, like room 237 for example, can be a metaphor for that one center of the brain that contains traumatic memories. Anyway, so that was my brief look at The Shining. I don't think that my review does this film any justice. I mean, there is just so much to talk about. But I just wanted to talk about the movie from the perspective of haunted house movies. And as far as haunted house movies go, this is one of the very best. It's a legendary horror film with some amazing performances. But as I alluded to earlier, Stephen King was not a fan of how they treated his novel in this film adaptation. A lot of that criticism stems from the fact that Jack Torrance in the novel was a much more sympathetic character. He was supposed to be this kind of flawed but essentially warm family man who was corrupted by the hotel's influence. But in the movie, they just go ahead and cast, Jack Nicholson kind of straight from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And you can see it clearly that from the onset of the film, Nicholson is just going ham-shit crazy. Which is an awesome performance, but it's definitely not the same kind of character development as you see in King's novel. And King himself would go on to make a more faithful miniseries based on the novel, although it didn't garner nearly as much legacy as Kubrick's version did. And that's just the ultimate testament to the film's legacy, that, for example, when they made the sequel, Dr. Sleep, Mike Flanagan was able to reuse visuals from Kubrick's The Shining, apparently with the blessing of Stephen King, so that's actually kind of impressive.
Well, that sounds fine to me.
So that wraps up this review. I want to say thanks again to my buddy D. Tommaso. Thank you for requesting this wonderful film. You are a godsend. And on that note, I just want to say thank you for the year 2025. I'll see you all next time in 2026.
How did you feel about the movie itself?
Well, I feel both ways. I got to see it 4 times because of commitments one place and another. And there are an awful lot of things about that movie that I think are flawless and beautiful and just marvelous. And then there are other times when I feel as though I'd given Stanley Kubrick a live grenade and he heroically threw his body on it.